having the ability to issue debt is enormously important to a government. There are several reasons. One is you want to stabilize the economy when there are recessions. You want to be able to run deficits and not have to contract all the time. A second reason is if you want to do public investment projects that are really valuable and useful, it's very helpful to be able to borrow for them. I think there's another reason which is less emphasized, but possibly more important, is the ability to deal with rare catastrophes, a financial crisis, a war, some need for military buildup, influenza epidemic. Many of the big debt buildups in history come not from recessions, which have little movements in debt, but from these other events. And being able to stand ready to be able to do that, to deal with something that's a catastrophe, is a very important role of debt. So because of that, although it's valuable to run deficits when there are recessions, you need to sometimes run surpluses or find more creative ways to bring your debt down. Well, I don't think there's a simple answer to that, because the euro was adopted possibly prematurely. It was a political move more than an economic one, and the hope was the politics would follow. To some extent it has, but to some extent it hasn't. So the ultimate answer has to be more European integration. There's really not another way forward. And the current plan calls for a banking union, having eventually, I guess, greater fiscal union and political union, but that's a ways off. So that's at the center of any long-term plan. Everything else after that is sort of a question of tactics, of how do you get there politically and economically. Well, I think from an economic point of view, economists have always thought that the rules about deficit policy ought to be tuned to the full employment surplus, not the actual surplus. In other words, if you're in a recession, you should be allowed to, run a larger deficit, I think, than the rules allow. And correspondingly, when you're in a boom, when you're growing very fast, you should be running a surplus. And I think a lot of the political problems surrounding the fiscal compact have come from countries not running surpluses when things are going well. I will also, of course, if there's need for public investment, that really isn't the same thing as a wasted government spending, because in the long run, it pays for itself. So there's certainly room to be more flexible at a theoretical level, but for the politicians, the leaders having to implement it, there are many practical questions when they don't even necessarily trust their own governments to run surpluses when things are going well, much less each other. And so I think it's one of the reasons you need to have more political integration to handle this process in a more normal way.